for a presentation. It's called The Energy Transition Reaches Escape Velocity, and Ed Brost is our presenter. Ed's a retired engineer and has over 35 years of experience in the energy sector with Atomic Energy of Canada, Ontario Hydro, and Shell. He has provided leadership in environmental aspects of thermal and nuclear power plant operation, bitumen, upgrading, petroleum refining, petrochemical production, operations, environmental engineering, environmental management systems, GHG reduction strategies, energy efficiency plans, best practices, and sustainable development. He volunteers his time as an associate of the Bauman Center for Sustainable Energy. Please welcome Ed.
Okay, I think we're in business. So, how come this, okay, the title says energy transition has reached escape velocity. What I mean by that is it's self-sustaining. It's on, and going to be ongoing. But you might not know that because we don't hear it in the news. You don't hear, oh, what you do hear is electric vehicle sales are collapsing. China is building more coal plants, and we just don't really see much good news. And the reason for that, of course, is if it reads, it bleeds. If it bleeds, it leads. And there's really, you don't sell a whole lot of commercials selling good news. Why are we, if you look at this chart, or the parts of it that you can see, in 2022, there were almost 1,300, or a little over 1,300 articles about climate change. You can't see it there, but in 2025, that number dropped around 500. So, no, there's that block is in there.
I know, is it on your screen now? Is it on your screen now?
Well, that's that thing? Yeah. Here, you got it, hang on. Just put an X there. I can't do that. What happens if I do this? It didn't work.
It's redacted.
No, ready to go.
While the
I don't know what you did, but meeting is being.
Been hacked in by the climate denialists.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's the leprechaun.
so while tech support is doing its thing, we have headlines, but they tend to be negative. But I contend that the real story is quite a bit different than what we don't see in the news. Lobbyists driving their politicians are pushing a negative story. At least some of them are. But there's a kind of a noise in the signal. But the real signal is economics. The economics are driving what I'm saying is a sustainable energy transition. One area you hear bad news, EV sales are collapsing. The market doesn't want them. You see the big three, GM, Ford, and Stellantis, writing off billions of dollars. But GM, Ford, and Stellantis are only one of hundreds of car companies around the world that are not doing that. And currently there are about 60 million. There we go. We're making progress.
Just let me look after the other one.
Okay. There we go. There are over 60 million electric vehicles worldwide. That's enough these are light duty vehicles, not trucks, trains, not trains, but trucks, ships, bicycles. And that is enough electric vehicles to reduce oil demand, gasoline and diesel by almost 3 million barrels a day that would have been being burnt if it weren't for those 60 million. Now, the shape of the curve, electric vehicles really started to happen around 2012 or so, and the curve isn't like this, it's like this. 20 million of those 60 million were sold last year around the world. Around each year, notionally, there's about 80 million light-duty vehicles sold around the world. 20 million of them were sold last year. What that means is 1 in 4 sales last year, 25% of sales around the world were EVs. Not a club. We just can't wait for losing here.
Oh, that's good.
Oh no. I'm gonna have to do this without. Share.
Shall I pull it up on mine?
I don't think it's a computer anymore. So.
Dick, please pull it up on yours.
Well, this problem is there's animation.
Let me move some stuff out of the way. I know what it is. Are you sharing up there now?
Yeah.
Sharing up there now?
We're just not in presentation mode.
You put it in presentation mode.
Use it. Did you put it on, Dick, can you put?
I have it on there, just give it a second.
Right.
There you go, there you go, there you go, look, don't fool anymore, just use the arrow keys.
China is by far the biggest automobile market in the world. 13 million electric vehicles are now driving around China, not burning gasoline. Europe sold 27% more electric vehicles in 2025 than in 2024. And emerging markets are experiencing double-digit growth. So the bad news is all EV sales are collapsing. Globally, that is far from true. A single electric scooter gasoline scooter doesn't use much fuel, but tens of millions of them do. And tens of millions of people in the developing world are now buying electric two-wheelers and three-wheelers. That's not part of the 60 million that I talked about. There are almost 700,000 all-electric buses driving around China today. And commercial fleets around the world are electrifying. Deliveries, last mile delivery sort of thing, because it makes sense. It hardly costs anything to fuel, and there's virtually no maintenance on an electric vehicle. So the idea that electric vehicle sales around the world are collapsing is simply not true. Solar and wind today, you probably all heard this, is the cheapest form of electricity generation in most parts of the world today. And that includes battery storage now. And if you look there, China has 581,000 megawatts of renewable wind and electricity. What, a megawatt, 1,000 megawatts is like one nuclear power plant unit. One unit, like at the Brost, are about 700 or 800 megawatts each, and they have 8 of them. This is equivalent to 580 nuclear units equivalent to in China. I would say that that's good news. In Canada, you can see we're at 18,000. That's like 18 nuclear units equivalent generation capacity in Canada. So, and there was more money spent, investment in renewable energy last year than in fossil fuel energy around the world. And the reason for that is because investors go where the money is. There's a return on investment there, as opposed to investing in a, say, a coal-fired power plant. It's not going to, might not run for the 20 or 30 years that it's for its economic life. Battery storage, this is a picture of a battery storage unit that was commissioned in the Yukon, I think in 2023. Battery prices are falling. They're following the same trajectory that solar and wind have followed over the last 10 years. Battery prices are, that's a word there, are collapsing. And that's one of the reasons why electric vehicle sales are scaling up so fast, because most expensive part of an electric car is the battery, and the prices are coming down something like 90% over the last 10 years. That drop in price is what is allowing grid scale back. Now, Tesla, you may have heard of the Tesla Powerwall that you can get for your home. Well, there's a whole bunch of companies competing with Tesla. They also have their, what they call megapacks. I think each one of this 10 megawatts. I think there's a couple of 100 megawatt grid scale project underway here in Sarnia, or at least there's a proposal. I wasn't able to find much out about it. Virtual power plants are what is a virtual power plant? People have electric cars that make the power that's in their car available to the grid if they want to get paid for it. The virtual power plants, including people having a willingness to turn or let the grid, the system operator, adjust the thermostat in your house. And Canada, I believe it or not, Canada's a big player in virtual power plants. We have this opportunity right here in Sarnia. You may have seen an email or something from Blue Water Power inviting you for $75 to allow the system to operate your thermostat. And you can say, well, I'm no more than 1 degree or 2 degrees. And so if it's a hot day in summer and power's tight, they can lower the air conditioner, increase the temperature of your home a little bit to reduce load, the virtual power plants. So that's, to my mind, that's progress, and it gets back to economics. Why would people do it? Well, because it can save a little bit of money, especially if they're at work. Agrivoltaics. Now there's a word that I'm going to say less than 10 years ago would have been a typo or a misspelled word. So what is agrivoltaics? It's a synergy between solar power and agricultural activity. You can have, there are certain plants, we did a study at the Bowman Center, identified, I think, 6 crops that can be grown in Ontario that do better under shade than if they had direct sunlight. Solar voltaics benefits plants because it shelters them from heavy rain or wind. Animals love it because they can get out of the sun and get into the shade. People are putting solar panels under transmission lines and to create power, but also to create habitat for bugs, bees, and other things that are important to ecology. Oh, yeah, here we go. Higher yields and shade. This is a big deal here. Farmers can make money. They can get as much money, if not more money, by harvesting their crops or grazing animals. But then on top of that, they get the icing on the cake. They can get paid for the electricity. Now, unfortunately, this is bad news. Unfortunately, in Ontario, the policy is that you can't put solar panels on productive farmland. Now, when that policy was developed quite a few years ago, it was probably in best intentions because people didn't understand the term that science didn't exist. It does today. I was actually an accident how agrivoltaics came to be. UCLA, I think, US University was doing a study. What they were looking for is how much damage to crop yields occurs if you did go to the trouble of covering the panel or the farm with solar panels. And to everybody's surprise, a bunch of crops, yields actually went up. Hence the beginning of the field of agrivoltaics. So that's one thing we need to do in Ontario, is try to get that policy changed. This is going on globally, including in the United States, because there's money involved. Coal is in structural decline. Coal, of course, as you probably all know, is the highest GHG emitting or intensity fuel that we have, fossil fuel that we have. Now, if you look at this chart, the orange line is the OECD countries. So you can see coal consumption is declining, but then you say, well, there's some bad news. We can publish this. Coal demand is going up globally. Climate change it's not working. But there's more to the story than that, because economies are growing 2, 3, 4% a year around the world. And so you have to, is coal declining in the context of global GDP? So the orange line is the global GDP, and you can see the dip there in COVID. It's been going up. The second line is coal consumption. These are normalized numbers, so it's an index. So if you take that coal line and divide it by the GDP line, what you see there is a negative coal intensity relative to our economy. And that's what I mean by structural decline. How's Canada doing? Well, there's Canada. Around 2025, we were consuming a little over, about 35 million tons a year of coal. This is for producing power. By 2025, that number had dropped to below 3 million tons a year. So that, to my mind, that's really good news. Alberta doesn't produce electricity anymore with coal. Who would have thought they would be this far along? But there you have it. Good news. Heat is transforming. One of the areas that, you can drive an electric car and you can have an electric bus and whatever, but how do you heat your house? Well, as you probably, I bet you there are people in this room now who have heat pumps. Heat pumps are for home heating are outselling gas furnaces. And there's a heat pump right there out the window. It used to be that people would say, well, it's too cold. You can have a heat pump in Texas, but it doesn't work. Well, cold climate, and we don't, in Southern Ontario, it's not cold enough for a true cold climate heat pump. We have a pretty, if you put a heat pump in your home here, it'd be fairly conventional technology, but the technology to have a heat pump that works on Winnipeg is here now. Heat industries that need a lot of heat. There's a couple of ways. There's a steel mill here in Ontario that is moving toward using hydrogen instead of metallurgical coal to reduce iron ore to iron. And what's a thermal battery? If you need an industry that needs, say, 1500 degrees C for whatever reason, thermal batteries are basically big ceramic blocks, and you heat them with electricity to 2000 degrees C, and then there you have it. And then you use the heat in that block to provide heat for your industry, and you do this throughout the day. The blocks are heated with electricity, so then it's continuous. Did you know that thing is a washing machine? It's not just an ordinary washing machine. That washing machine is also the dryer. You can buy these things at Rona, and Best Buy has them on the floor. You can buy them anywhere. They've been around now for a few years. You put your load of laundry in that door, shut the door, press the button, walk away. 2 hours later, the clothes are washed and dried.
Just a dryer?
Yeah, so it sounds like there's some people, we have one. It works great. Oh, by the way, just for those who don't know what that is, the top part of the washing machine contains a heat pump. So this washer dryer, electric dryer, doesn't need 220 volts. You can plug it into a 110 volt outlet. The heat pump condenses the moist air as that's being evaporated, and the moist air is condensed into water, goes down the drain, so you don't need a dryer vent. You can put this thing anywhere. That's a heat pump water heater, and there are numerous brands, and I think in Canada you can get a grant to put one of those in your home today. That is an industrial scale heat pump used to make steam for a hospital. So the idea that we can use electricity to provide heat for industry and for our homes and for institutions is here today. You won't hear that though in the news. I don't know why. To my mind, it's a good, well, because it doesn't sell ads. What about corporate leadership? So there's a group that was formed in 2004 called the Climate Group. And the Climate Group is basically in industries, governments, and subnational governments working to combat climate change. There are about 650 businesses plus governments involved in this. 400 of those 650 companies are committed to renewable energy, supplying all of their electrical power requirements by renewable energy by 2050. And so that's by 2050, and oh, by the way, they mean netting. So there might be days where wind hasn't been blowing or whatever, and so they need to use gas power, nuclear power, or something. So over the course of a whole year, the average, they will exceed their demand by at 100% or more. But a couple of years ago, a new group formed. They're called the 24/7 Clean Power Organization. They're a subset of Climate Group, as is the renewable energy component. And their commitment is 100% of their electricity within the next 10 years will come from renewables 24/7. That means every hour of every day. They're not netting anything out over the course of a year, and they're not buying carbon credits. Who's involved in this? Some of the biggest companies in the world. Google, AstraZeneca is a pharmaceutical company. Iron Mountain is a data center company. And so these are huge, huge companies, and they're making this big commitment. How would you know that? You're not going to find that out by watching CNN for some reason. Okay, so jobs. Data center, we hear all about how data centers are going to take jobs. Well, I don't think we can stick a robot or a computer up above a 300-foot tower to install a wind turbine blade. This is creating jobs. The clean energy sector is creating huge jobs around the world. The International Energy Agency estimated, this is for 2023, the 2024 report isn't out yet, created 1.5 million jobs in 2023 around clean energy. Over the last 5 years, that sector, only the electricity component of that, not like wind turbines and solar panels and not batteries, created 3.9 million jobs over the last 5 years. So there are jobs here. They're kind of jobs that I think automation is going to have a hard time displacing. In 2023, half of that 1.9 million jobs were just in the solar sector around the world. And then on top of that, you have EV battery. We have 2 or 3 battery plants being built here in Ontario that are going to provide jobs in the clean tech sector. So, lobbyists who are driving our politicians are having a problem here because this is, things are kind of delayed a little bit in North America, but there's 400 million people live in the United States and Canada. There are almost 8 billion in the world. There's 7.5 billion people are not paying any attention to what's going on in North America. The politicians and the industries the fossil fuel industries are having a really hard time with this. You'll have to, and why? It's because of economics. Pardon the pun, economics trumps ideology. There is investment momentum. I mentioned that there's more investment now in clean energy than there is in fossil fuel-based energy. Why is that investment? Oh, sorry, I mentioned the corporate commitments on the previous slide and subnational leadership. The investment momentum is there because the return on investment on clean energy projects is there. So the bottom line, the transition is